Pranams to everyone. It's a pleasure to share some of my thoughts and experiences, in understanding the synergy between yoga, Sanskrit, and Ayurveda. In fact, it was my encounter with Ayurveda as a student of Ayurveda that introduced me to both Sanskrit and yoga. And there is a verse that we were introduced to as students that really sums up the insight that we also gained in the course of our learning about this deep synergy between these three disciplines. So this verse goes thus: Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarottam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi. So Patanjali is the one individual who seems to have in one sweeping move, perfected the human instrument at three levels, at the level of the mind, the speech, and also the body. So we know that the contribution of Patanjali to yoga is the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, of course, and to Sanskrit is the great Patanjala Mahabhashyam. And Ayurveda, it is believed that the celebrated text on Ayurveda, one of the most authoritative and ancient textbooks of Ayurveda called the Charaka Samhita, was actually redacted and expressed at the Charaka Samhita by sage Patanjali. So today I would like to explore, the deeper meaning of this idea of yoga, Ayurveda, and Sanskrit coming together to help the human being achieve this higher goal of life through a process of self-transformation. And I think it makes it relevant as today's topic is the resurgence of Sanskrit and the integral synergies it presents with yoga. And I take the liberty also to bring in Ayurveda into this discussion. So I would like to, first of all, look at yoga as a process of deep inner transformation. We are much more accustomed to yoga as, physical activity. But if you go deep into the tradition, and even in Ayurveda, yoga is represented as a tool for, a transformation of inner consciousness, a deep inner transformation. And as Patanjali defines, yoga is the state of chitta vritti nirodha. And I would like to dwell upon this concept a little bit while I try to bring the connections between Sanskrit and Ayurveda and where these three disciplines actually merge and unify to show us the way forward of in self-transformation. So my insight has basically come from also the study of Ayurveda, where this idea of chitta vritti, I'm today looking at it also from an Ayurvedic viewpoint, is explained through this concept of the noise to signal ratio. When we say that the mind is quiet, it does not mean that the mind is completely disappeared or completely dissolved. It only means that we are eliminating the noise from the mind so that the signal is very clear, that the signal of deep awareness. So this makes sense from the Ayurvedic point of view, because Ayurveda is still dealing with embodied existence, where we are interacting with the real world. And so from an Ayurvedic point of view, the state of yoga is one in which your mind is functioning without the disturbance of self-generated noise, which causes these emotional turbulences and, eclipses the clarity and depth of your own awareness. And so for me, right from the beginning, when I looked at yoga from the angle of Ayurveda, it made a lot of sense that, what yoga is talking about is not a complete switching away of your awareness. It's not, when you say yoga chitta vritti nirodha, it doesn't mean that you are just going blank. It actually means that your awareness becomes more sharp, more clear. And I mean, there is not this, distortion, what we call as, bias. Even in scientific thinking, this is very important. So what Ayurveda has also discovered and explained is that, the functioning of the mind, I mean, it's possible for us to achieve chittavritti nirodha when we come into contact with our sense objects. So when we are in contact with the desired sense object, for a moment, there is chittavritti nirodha. And in fact, we are all, unconscious yogis in that we are trying to achieve this chittavritti nirodha through sensual experiences, because that is our deeper nature. There is that inner tendency to quieten the mind. But the only thing is we do this by reaching out to the external world. And from an Ayurvedic point of view, yoga is that discovery that this quietening of the mind, just chittavritti nirodha, can happen without the contact of any external sense object. And yoga is that technique. I mean, if we are encountering a sensual experience, the quietening of the mind that we experience is short-lived. But when we achieve it through the process of yoga, it is continuous. So this chittavritti nirodha that is induced by the quietening of the mind from within, I mean, that is the ultimate goal of yoga. So yoga, we can say from this point of view, because I would like to construct this understanding of yoga before we bring Sanskrit into the picture, is that yoga is a mind-body discipline that aims to quieten the mind, reduce the inner noise, what we call as, which enables it to reach a state of inner silence and anchors it to the deeper source of our consciousness. So if you look at the goal of yoga as this achievement of this inner silence, then it becomes very interesting to also look at what is actually the goal of Sanskrit. I mean, of course, we look at language mostly as a mode of communication. But what I have understood is that Sanskrit is also a mode of refining your inner instrument for, getting a deeper knowledge about yourself and the reality in which you are embedded. So it's not just a means of communication, it's also a means to refine. And that's why the word Sanskrit, it means that refinement of your mind, of your speech, that takes you to a higher level of consciousness. So this theme is there in our tradition that, the best communication is silence. Mauna Vyakhya Pragadita. So, and this is not an ordinary silence. I mean, a person who has achieved this inner silence of yoga is able to communicate even without language. And that is considered as the ultimate method of communication. So if we don't have that inner silence, I mean, we wouldn't be able to communicate properly, even with the most, articulately expressed language. Whereas if you have that inner silence, then even without the use of a language, you are able to communicate. I mean, this is the power of Sanskrit. So Sanskrit in that way is a tool for refinement, or inner refinement. And this is very beautifully explained, that Sanskrit is the language of silence or maunam. It has been developed by the munis. And who is a muni? Manana Shilo Muni, somebody who is contemplative. So Muner Bhavam Mauna. So a muni's bhava is mauna. That is, when you become contemplative, you become silent. So Sanskrit is a language that leads you to that inner contemplation and thereby brings your mind into a state of inner silence. It doesn't mean that you don't have to speak, but it is a state in which your silence itself becomes more powerful than speech itself. So it is like, when we say, so Sanskrit, this is what I have understood and I also experienced in my study of Ayurveda, where we had to learn the classical text through Sanskrit. And as you go deeper and deep into understanding Ayurveda to Sanskrit, the real feeling is, you are now listening to Dolby digital audio. I mean, everything becomes crystal clear. The noise is gone. It's now stereophonic environment. And this is why I think Sanskrit is also called as the Deva Bhasha, or the language of light. Because Deva here, I mean, we of course interpret it as divine or, from the heavens, but the Sanskrit word Deva actually means Diva Prakashane, to light up. So Sanskrit is therefore called as Deva Bhasha because it lights up your inner being. And today there are studies which have also shown this, MRI, functional MRI studies, people who read Sanskrit alphabet. There was a study which was published in Current Science which showed that, the same verse, the same material read in Sanskrit alphabet and read in English alphabet influences the brain in two different ways. So when you read the passage in Sanskrit letters, both hemispheres of your brain gets lighted up in a functional MRI scanning. Whereas when you read the same thing in English transliteration, today, I mean, it's become fashionable also to read Sanskrit in the English transliteration. But we must realize that the impact it has on the brain is much lesser than when you actually read it using the Sanskrit, alphabets. So this is a beauty of Sanskrit, that when you use Sanskrit, when you write Sanskrit, when you speak Sanskrit, it also, that is from an Ayurvedic point of view, I've understood that this is an excellent physiotherapy exercise. That, when you write Sanskrit, it develops your finer motor skills. When you speak Sanskrit, it also enables, it's almost like a speech therapy. So this silence that Sanskrit leads to and yoga leads to, I mean, this is the synergy. I mean, while yoga is trying to reach to that same silence through a set of mind-body techniques and activities, Sanskrit is also leading us to that same position. And in fact, what I seem to have understood is that Sanskrit is also a language which is a medium to express a higher experience. This is very, very important. I mean, we don't have a language, it is a samadhi bhasha, or a bhasha which came out of that state of higher consciousness. And that is the reason why, I mean, Sanskrit has that elevating effect, which is the reason why it is called Sanskritam, which is why it is called as Deva Bhasha. And so this, I think, is that inner synergy between yoga and Sanskrit. And that when we bring yoga and Sanskrit together, we actually increase the power of both to effect an inner transformation. Now, coming to Ayurveda, it's also very, very interesting that Ayurveda also points to this as the ultimate goal of human life, finding this space of inner silence in the deepest area of your own inner being. I mean, this is in Ayurveda also defined as the highest state of health that you can achieve, because this word Ayurveda uses for health is swastha. Swastha means one who is established in the inner core of one's being. In Ayurveda, we don't say that someone is healthy if their blood results are within normal range, or, all these parameters are very superficial. You're not healthy as long as you find that inner space of silence deep inside your being. And from there, you are able to establish yourself in a state of, harmonious coexistence of all the levels of your being. So it's very interesting that the Ayurvedic text Ashtanga Hridaya mentions. This is a classical Ayurvedic textbook. Many of us were intrigued when we were introduced to this textbook, which begins by saying that, the root cause of all diseases is in the mind. It's the emotional turbulence of your mind that translates into diseases of all kinds. And that the ultimate physician is one who removes that emotional weaknesses, brings emotional stability into your being. So emotional healing has been extolled in Ayurveda as the highest form of healing. And here again, if you look at it from the point of view of Sanskrit and yoga, This is the same thing has been expressed differently in yoga, Sanskrit, and Ayurveda. Here, what we call as noise or the kleshas, the vrittis, the klesha kara vrittis in yoga, and in Sanskrit, what we call, as the disturbance that, distorts your perception. In Ayurveda, these are called as the ragadi rogas or the emotional turbulences. So in Ayurveda, the whole goal again is because Ayurveda says that we need to be empowered by health intelligence. Health is something which you have to create from inside. It's not something which can be offered to you. And today in the COVID scenario, we realize much more than before that, self-care is the best care. I mean, we are not, even in the most developed countries, people are not able to find themselves a bed in a hospital. The WHO was talking about health for all and then universal health care. But today we have reached a point where, the future of humanity, of a healthy existence, is to awaken what we call as health intelligence. And Ayurveda says that unless the mind reaches that point of inner silence, health intelligence will not be awakened. So health intelligence is the biggest insurance against disease and untimely death. Of course, Ayurveda accepts that we will all have to die, but untimely death can be prevented, untimely diseases can be prevented, and this is achieved through health intelligence. So it's interesting that Ayurvedic medicines are called as aushadha. Aushadha means a burning transformation of your rasa dhatu. It's interesting that the essence of your food is called as rasa. Rasa also means in Sanskrit delight, or the highest state of ecstasy or bliss that an individual can attain or achieve. And we say that this shuddhi of rasa is the goal of Ayurveda. So even from the food that you eat, if you make sure that it is refined and completely chemically transformed, aushadha is that which by a burning transformation awakens your higher intelligence. So the goal of Ayurveda is not just to cure a disease, but take you to a state where your health intelligence is awakened, and then you are able to lead a conscious life, a life of awareness, and a life of inner transformation. So this is how, in my journey, I have experienced the connections between yoga, Sanskrit, and Ayurveda, and all the three leading you to a state of, discovery of a deeper aspect and realm of our inner being. So I think I will stop here. And thank you very much for this opportunity to share my views today. Thank you.